recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank Mr. McGovern for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I'll yield myself so much time as I may consume.
Without objection, the gentleman may proceed.
Today, we consider House Concurrent Resolution 83, or technically we're considering the rule to consider House Concurrent Resolution 83, a resolution to remove the United States Armed Forces from hostilities in Iran. But the thing is, we're not engaged in hostilities in Iran. Once again, we are considering a measure that will have no force of law. This is a non-binding concurrent resolution. There was some debate in the Rules Committee last night on whether a concurrent resolution under the War Powers resolution is in fact non-binding, but in the Senate, a joint resolution has been introduced, making it likely that this House concurrent resolution will go no further than the action today. The Constitution grants Congress the power to declare war. The Constitution also designates the President as the Commander-in-Chief of the armed forces. This sets up a conflict. The courts have not delineated the boundaries of these authorities or determined the gaps between them that would either deny power to a president or to the Congress, one at the expense of the other. Federalist number 69, Alexander Hamilton, argued that the president's power resides only in the direction of the military as placed by law at his command. Presidents have long argued that their role as commander-in-chief, coupled with their inherent authority over foreign affairs, grants them the power to engage the armed forces, short of war, as they see fit. Since the founding of our country, the Supreme Court has ruled both that the President enjoys greater discretion when acting with respect to matters of foreign affairs, and that absent an authorization of action during wartime, any action by the President was void. Despite the struggle to maintain the separation of powers with regard to engaging our armed forces, the motivation underlying the inclusion of the Constitution for these powers for both the President and the Congress continues to this day. The desire to protect and defend the United States, its persons, and its assets. Congress passed the War Powers Resolution in 1973, largely in response to the experiences in Korea and Vietnam. The War Powers Resolution authorizes the engagement of the forces of the United States in hostilities when there's a declaration of war, or there exists a specific statutory authorization, or a national emergency created by attack upon the United States, its territories or possessions, or its armed forces. To assess the current situation, let's examine what has led us to this point. In June of 2019, Iran shot down a surveillance aircraft that was flying over international waters near the Strait of Hormuz. This was an unmanned aerial drone. At the time, President Trump was advised by his military advisors to strike back. But the President opted not to strike back because it would have resulted in Iranian casualties, and he felt he could not justify creation of human casualties because of the loss of a machine. I agree with the President in that decision. I think his restraint was remarkable, but certainly exemplary. In December of 2019, Iranian cruise missiles struck nearly 20 targets of critical energy infrastructure in Saudi Arabia. This disrupted a significant portion of Saudi oil production. In December of 2019, Iranian-backed forces in Iraq targeted military facilities where United States forces were co-located. On December 27th, an Iranian-backed Hezbollah group, the U.S.-designated foreign terrorist organization, attacked a base in northern Iraq, and they killed a U.S. contractor and wounded 4 U.S. service members. The United States responded, and it launched a retaliatory airstrike in Iraq and Syria. On January 2nd, 2020, acting on intelligence of imminent threat to American interests and in response to the persistent attack by Iranian-backed entities, the United States military killed General Qasem Soleimani. Soleimani was the longtime leader of the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps, the Quds Force. The Iran Revolutionary Guard is a U.S. designated terrorist organization. It has been supporting proxy forces throughout the Middle East and attacking United States interests and allies for over a decade. Soleimani previously operated under strict security, but in recent years, he has moved much more freely and openly, believing that the United States did not have the willpower to be able to attack him. His atrocities include the deaths of hundreds of Americans and the attempted assassination of a Saudi diplomat in the United States, among other things. President Obama's former Secretary of Homeland Security, Secretary Jay Johnson, stated that General Soleimani was a legitimate military target. I do want to be clear. The last thing that I want to see, and I suspect anyone in this body wants to see, is our men and women committed to another conflict in the Middle East. We want those conflicts to end, as does the President. But, Madam Speaker, today, the world is a safer place without General Soleimani, and who would want him to come back? Despite the disagreement in how further to engage in the Middle East, in the country of Iran, be it militarily or diplomatically, the last thing we should be doing is broadcasting our plans to the enemy. By passing this War Powers Resolution, directing the President to remove United States armed forces from hostilities with Iran, a point that is in itself in contention, we are effectively telling the Iranian mullahs that it is okay to push forward with their aggressive posturing. Rather than stating what the President cannot do, perhaps we should be authorizing what the President can do. Last night in the Rules Committee, it became clear that both Republicans and Democrats agree that the world is a safer place without General Soleimani, and any war with Iran needs to be authorized by Congress. Seemed to be general agreement. Democrats want to maintain the separation of powers, as do I, but the question is, to what extent are we jeopardizing our safety? I believe Congress does need to authorize military action and maintain the separation of powers as intended by the founders, but we don't need to broadcast it to the world. While we may be divided on the need for this resolution, let us recognize the privilege that we enjoy each and every day, being able to stand in this House and debate these issues without fear of retribution of our government. Those protesters in Iran did not enjoy that freedom. They cut off the internet and eliminated those protesters. That's why you don't see them anymore. With that, I urge opposition to this rule, and I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman